Good morning. Sorry it took so long. We had to get us up streaming and the projector going. Glad everyone's here. See, we got a lot of our travelers back. Glad everyone's back. Are there any prayer requests this morning? It's good to see Lisa back with us, but we still need to keep her in our prayers for some of the issues she's going through. Anything else? Yes, Tom. Yeah. They're at Lake Orion, I believe, this morning, isn't it? Yes. So last week it was announced that Emily's cousin Randa was getting ready to go into hospice, but Randa passed away this Monday. So we definitely want to keep the entire McClure family in our prayers. And that's where Nathan and Emily are this morning. Nathan's going to be doing the funeral service down in Lake Orion. It's going to be right after their services, so Nathan and Emily are down in Lake Orion this morning. Any other announcements? Will you bow with me, please? Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this day you've given us, this time which we can study your word. Father, we're thankful for the opportunity we can come to you in prayer and put our petitions before you, that we can come to you and thank you for the blessings that you give us and our answered prayers, Father. Right now, we ask you to be with the McClure family as they're dealing with the loss of a loved one. Father, we ask that you comfort them and strengthen them during this time of grief. Father, we ask that you continue to be with Lisa as she's struggling with some health issues. Keep her strong, keep her healthy, Father, and let the doctors find out what's going on, that she can be fully restored to her health. We ask you to be with the rest of our congregation here who are struggling with illnesses. You know each one's individual need. Extend your healing hand and restore their health. In Jesus' name, amen. We made it through verse 9 last week of Daniel 11. And, uh-oh. Caleb, can you upload these? I think you uploaded the wrong one. If not, our whole lesson just changed. Unless we want to talk about last week again, which I really don't want to do. But what we ended up with is last week we've been talking about all these battles going on between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, and we ended up last week with the king of the north, which is Seleucus II, fighting the king of the south, which was Ptolemy III. And Ptolemy III was, they're just battling back and forth with the Egyptian people, the Israelite people caught right in the middle. The Ptolemies were in the south, which is basically Egypt, and the Seleucids were, generally say, the Syria area, which is to north. And so Egypt comes in to where the Jewish people are, then back out to where the Seleucids. So it's kind of like a little funnel effect in the center there. And so when these two countries, or these two empires, the Ptolemies and the Seleucids, were battling each other, they're going through where the Jewish people are. Caleb, I didn't tell you there was two on there. There should have been two PowerPoints on there. Daniel 11, I think it says verse 10. That's the one I'm going to want. Caleb. Did I call him Daniel? Oh, okay. I don't know what I called him. It's been a rough week. I think that's it. Yes, sir. No, this isn't it. This is still the old one. Anyhow, we'll go on. The bulk of this that I have up there is the timeline, or the little map I gave of all the kings and with their empires and their dates, which Sherry brought to my attention at the end of class yesterday on the way home, that I had some wrong dates in there. So I've got new sheets with the right dates. But I've got this up there a lot, and I highlighted the kings as we're talking about them as we're going through this time frame. And we've got to remember from the time frame that Daniel's at right now in his life, that he's being told of this prophecy that's coming on to some of these events that are actually going to happen, is hundreds of years. Because Daniel is in roughly 536, 37, 538 BC at this time, that this is happening to Daniel, and this angel is telling Daniel what's going to happen and going to be happening. some of these things that we're seeing going to be happening is happening in 250. When we finally get down to Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes, which we're going to be talking about a lot today, he's taken over in 175 BC. So we're talking 400 years time frame of what is being predicted in the future, Daniel's going to be finding out what's going to be happening in the following verses here. Any questions about what we talked about last week or a little bit previous of some of these kings and kingdoms of what's happening? Well, then let's move on. We're in Daniel chapter 11. We're going to pick up in verse 10 through 13, and we'll talk about that a little bit and keep going on. Daniel 11, verses 10 through 13. His sons will mobilize and assemble a great multitude of great forces, and one of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through, that he may again wage war upon his very fortress. The king of the south will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north. Then the latter will rise a great multitude, but that multitude will be given into the hand of the former. Talking about the king of the north will be going up and he'll be given into the hand of the king of the south, which the angel is not given specifics of who these kings are. That's where I'm given the history from the records from some of the Greek records, from the Seleucids. Our history books are telling us the names of these kings with these date stamps. That's where I'm getting all this from, because the Bible's not saying who Ptolemy the third, fourth, when he ruled, or when the Seleucids or Antiochus Epiphanes ruled. It's just saying the king of the north, the king of the south. That's what the angel's telling Daniel, but history has given us these date stamps and these exact kings of what's happening. Verse 12, when the multitude is carried away, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cause tens of thousands to fall, yet he will not prevail. For the king of the north will again raise a greater multitude than the former, and after an interval of some years, he will press on with a great army and much equipment. Again, talking about more battles between the king of the north and the south, the Seleucids against the Ptolemies, with God's people, the Jewish people, caught right in the middle. Are we up yet? Getting there? Okay. Because I got verses 4, 5, 6, and 7 right on deck right now. Verse 10, when it says his sons will mobilize, this is his sons, he is Seleucid II. He died in 226 BC and was succeeded by his son, which is what we're talking about here in verse 10. His sons, Seleucus III, and Seleucus III, will continue to wage war against the Ptolemies. But Seleucus III, was murdered only after a few years into his reign, and he was succeeded in power by his brother, Antiochus III. Also, Antiochus III the Great is what he was called. So that is what verse 10 is talking about. His sons of Seleucus II. The sons are Seleucus III, but he came out of power because he was murdered, and the one taken over now is Antiochus III. So these are the two sons that are going to assemble a great multitude, a great force, a large army, and battle against the Ptolemies, the kings of the south, the rulers of the south. And Daniel's being told this. He's not being told the specifics, but he's being said, hey, this guy that was in power, he's not going to be the one waging war now. It's going to be his sons doing this. Daniel don't know who this particular ruler is. He knows he is somebody from, the north that's going to be doing this, but he knows it's his sons that are going to continue this battle, waging war against the king of the south. And we get the specifics through history, but we're not being told the specifics here. So Daniel's being told a broad picture. He's being told some detail, but not the specifics of who these people are that is going to cause all this mayhem and wage all these different wars. But he knows it's going to be some king from the north going against the king of the south. And we do know the details, and we get the names, and we can put a timeline together with dates and names through the history records that we have. And this is all proving the prediction of what we're seeing here in the entire chapter 11, but specifically at this point in verses, verse 10 and through 13 of what's going on. And at the end of verse 10, it talks about that the guys that are going to be waging war are going to go up his very fortress. This is the king of the south's fortress, and he's referring to the Ptolemy fortress at Raphia, and this was a very stronghold in the southern side of the Palestinian area. So history books say that this area had a very big stronghold, which was very well fortified, and that is the fortress that's being talked about here in verse 10. We'll pass all these slides, folks. Sorry about that. Any questions? A lot of information, a lot of history being thrown here, and I could glaze over basically all of chapter 11 here and just go by what is written and not give specifics about some of these kings and that, but I wouldn't be doing the book of Daniel justice, because we have this history that tells us exactly what happened, who these people are, these dates and timestamps, and history is validating the prophecy of what's being told here in Daniel chapter 11. These, not that one. Go ahead. If anybody wants it, I have some more of these sheets handy. If you want to, while I'm shooting some of these names off, you can see who we're talking about. Sherry will pass those out, or Dave will pass those out. I only got like 10 or 15 of them, but when I shoot these names off, you can see where they're going through. And on the left side of the sheet is the Ptolemy Empire, and you can see the reign of those people coming down. More toward the middle and the right side, where it starts off with Seleucus the first, that is the Seleucid Empire, and you can see how their generations happen and who's going to be taking charge of that. And then the arrows that are pointing toward somebody else with a name there that's in brackets with M, that is a woman. The M says they married, and who the arrow is pointing to, that's who they married. So we can make more of those if you want. But that's what that is saying. And you can see how now the Ptolemy Empire and the Seleucid Empire are kind of intermingled, because one of the Ptolemies married somebody from the Seleucids, and we go down later on, we're going to see it's going to be going back the other way. And so these empires weren't strangers to each other, but eventually they did intermingle through marriage at that point. Verse 11. Let's talk about the king of the south, which is the Ptolemy Empire, and at this point we're talking about the king Ptolemy the Fourth. And this is who the king of the south is referred to in verse 11 here. And he's going to be enraged. Why? Because he's been attacked again by the king of the north, and he's going to go up and fight him again. This has been going on for hundreds of years already. The north fighting the south, south fighting the north. I don't even know if they still know why they're fighting each other. But we've got to remember how these two kingdoms came about. Do we remember back? It goes way back to Alexander the Great. He was the main force of the Greek Empire. When he died, 4 of his generals took over and split up the kingdom. These are 2 of his generals that took over certain areas of Alexander the Great Empire. Alexander the Great had the Greek Empire a fighting, working machine. He had the whole area all unified. But once he died and it went under 4 generals, each of those had their own mindset, their own plans, their own thoughts. They wanted to rule their own area their own way. And of course, it caused conflicts with other of those one general amongst the other 3 generals, and they started infighting against themselves. So this once strong Greek empire that was a war machine is now battling against itself, specifically the Ptolemies and Seleucids. These are the ones we hear about a lot in history. The other ones did little battles with each other, but it was so insignificant, I couldn't find a whole lot in the history books. But it's these 2 empires, these 2 smaller empires of the Greek Empire, the Seleucids and Ptolemies, that kept infighting against each other. And that's what's being talked about here in Daniel. And I'm talking a lot about the Ptolemies and Seleucids because we're seeing it here in Daniel. But that's not what the point of Daniel 11 is getting to. It's somebody further down the line. When we get to Antiochus, I believe it's the 4th, he's the one that's going to cause all the havoc and all the pain and all the suffering against the Jewish people. Yes, they're having some difficulty now with these two countries fighting against, these 2 empires fighting against each other, because they're caught in the middle. I mean, when the north is fighting the south, they're traipsing through their land, they're beating them up a little bit, and all of a sudden it goes the other way. And for the most part, the Jewish people were under the southern rule. They were under the Ptolemy rule for the most part. But eventually they're going to be taken over and brought underneath the Seleucid Empire. We'll see that a little bit later on in chapter 11. So God's people, they're not doing the battle, but they're caught in the middle of it when the Seleucids and the Ptolemies are constantly fighting each other, going back and forth and back and forth. But the gist of chapter 11 is not necessarily the battle between the Ptolemies and Seleucids. It's getting to the point of all these bad things that are happening to the Jewish people while this war is going on between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids, is when we get further down the line to a Seleucid ruler, which is Antiochus IV. That is going to be a lot of the focal point later on in chapter 11 if we finally get to it. Continuing on in verse 11 here, I talked about the king of the south, which was Ptolemy IV. He got mad because of all this fighting between him and the Seleucids. He attacks, they get attacked back and forth. So what does he do? He goes and starts attacking the north. And he's attacking Antiochus III. So we got Ptolemy IV fighting Antiochus III. And this is one of the larger battles that's recorded in history. The Ptolemy army that I found many different numbers, but this comes up the most. His army was approximately 50,000 strong of the Ptolemies themselves. There was approximately 20,000 Egyptian warriors that were there, but they were relatively newly trained. There were some cavalries, there were some mercenaries, and I found this in multiple places. They had 73 African elephants. Not 70, not 80, but 73 African elephants in his war, his military. He went up against the Seleucid army that had over 60,000 warriors. 10,000 of them were the elite, which were called the Strong Shields, and they were named after Alexander the Great. So they were brought out from under Alexander the Great, and they had his type of characteristics. Ruthless in war. These 10,000 were part of the elite. The Seleucids also had cavalry. They had 102 Indian elephants. History is specific on these numbers, and these are the two numbers I found most often in looking up. The 73 African elephants for the Ptolemies and 102 Indian elephants for the Seleucid. And it's just, like I said, it wasn't 80, it wasn't 90, it wasn't 100. It was 73 and 102. That is what I found over and over again. So why the specific of that exact number? No clue. But it showed up many, many times. The Seleucid army also had Arabian infantry, javelin warriors from the Scythians and the Medes. So we got these two strong countries, empires going against each other, battling again. And the king of the south is the one that started it, Ptolemy IV. When he went to battle, he split up his forces. He had quite a few of them flank right, quite a few of them flank left, and a smaller group going down the middle. And initially, one of the flanks got defeated very, very badly in battle. And part of the reason was he sent the majority of his elephants that way. And I had to look this up. I did not realize that African elephants were much smaller than Indian elephants in size. And history was saying that they didn't say the elephants were scared. They didn't say the elephants were frightened. But when they came up against these larger elephants, they basically turned and ran away. So these elephants that part of the Ptolemies were relying on in this battle turned and went the other way and started trampling some of their own troops, started, just running away from battle. I mean, like they were scared because they were coming up against a much larger, much more fierce competitor on the side, elephant versus elephant. So how true that is, I found it in multiple cases, but I don't know how they can determine that they turned because they were afraid or the sight of these larger elephants that they went up against. But that is what I'm finding in history, that flanking side of the Ptolemies lost because they lost many of their elephants due to them turning and running away from battle. If you find something on that, Tom, let me know. I don't know. I mean, I found it the one way, and it's like, yeah. Right. Yeah. Indian elephants. So, but I didn't realize what the size was, but what I was reading was the Indian elephants were much larger. It's like, okay. Exactly. Can't trust Google, which is where I got a lot of my information. So, are we good, Ted? No? What? Uh-oh. That's okay. I might not have put it on there. Oh, like I said, all it was doing was taking this map breakdown, and when I was talking about certain kings, I highlighted so you could see the sections that we're going to. And I had a few other things on there, but it won't stop us today. We're still making progress. So this battle went on between Ptolemy IV and Antiochus III, and even after the flanking of the Ptolemies was defeated, Antiochus III got very uplifted hearing that one of these flanks taking him was getting overrun. He became a little bit arrogant, and he kind of relaxed, saying that, hey, this other side will take care of its own business, the center will take care of its own business. Well, that wasn't the case. The Ptolemies came in, and the Ptolemies were successful in defeating the army of the Seleucids at that point and defeating Antiochus in roughly 217 BC is when this was happening. And so the Ptolemies did win this particular battle, and the Ptolemy army lost, and this is going through history again, through all this battle here of all the armies that all the men that were there, Ptolemies lost approximately 2,300 warriors between the infantry and cavalry. And they lost many of their elephants. Not necessarily they were killed, but many of them ran away and were gone at that point. Antiochus III, he lost over 11,000 warriors, and over 4,000 of them were taken prisoner and lost less than 10 elephants during the battle. So the loss of men during this time was drastically less for the Ptolemy army versus it was the Seleucid army, from roughly 2,300 to 11,000 difference in men that were lost during this battle. And it was the one that lost the fewest men, the Ptolemy army, that actually won this battle that happened at this particular time. And this battle, why Ptolemy IV wanted to do this, because last time they was battled, he lost a little bit of land. He went back, and through this battle, he got part of his territory back, which was part of Palestine again and part of Phoenicia. So these rulers are basically fighting each other to be land grabbers. Every time they fight, they get a little bit of land. When they fight the next time, if they lose that little bit of land. And do we know where Palestine's at? That's where God's people are at. Caught right in the middle again. That's what these battles are going for over that particular land that the Seleucids and the Ptolemies are all trying to get throughout this multi-hundreds of years period of time of battling to get a little bit of land and become a little bit more powerful and stronger ruler than the guy up north or than the guy down south. Any questions? Like I said, a lot of history being thrown here, a lot of detail, which I think is important for us to understand of the history of what happened to God's people in a time frame that's not recorded in the Bible. Because this is not there. I've mentioned that several times, and Terry gave me a couple books about the Maccabees. This is happening during that time. This is going to be happening during the time that we have no records of between the Old Testament and New Testament. This is a prophecy that we're seeing here in the book of Daniel that came true, where there's nothing in the Bible recorded about it, about the specifics, other than history is telling us this really happened. Here's when it happened and whose here it was. The next one, this really happened and who it is. Like I mentioned on that timeline about Bernice, who married Antiochus III, there is historical record of that actually happening. There is proof of when and who married who gave who away. And it was predicted here, not by name, but it was saying, this king's going to give his daughter away to this other king on the other side. And it happened. Ted, you had your hand up. Not just Daniel. Correct. Came true. Wow. Good book to read, it sounds like. Thank you. Yes, Bill. Big-eared. I mean, that may have a play in it, but the biggest thing I found that I didn't say was when the elephants fight each other, it's their tusks that they do. When they headbutt each other, try to get their tusks mingled up, and they try to stab the other one in the side with their tusks. So the longer the tusk, not the longer the ear, is the benefiting factor there. But I didn't find out which one had the longer tusk at that. I just found the one that one was larger than the other. So, but we can do a whole study on elephants next year. I'll let somebody else teach that class. Yeah, Bill brought it up, Bill. That's Bill. You never know what you're going to learn in this class. Going on with verse 12, unless there's any other comment about the little bit that we talked about. Going on with verse 12 is saying, when the multitude is carried away, I mean, that could be referring to the dead that was killed, because there was thousands of Seleucids killed. I mean, and his heart will be lifted up. It could be that Ptolemy was saying this, look how many people I've killed. We won this battle. We gained part of this land that we wanted back. And then at the end of verse 12 it says, yet he will not prevail. The he is Ptolemy the Fourth. And unfortunately for him, he won this battle. He became boastful. He became arrogant. He became proud of the victory that he did. He got some of this land back. He beat this army, and look how many people he killed. Look how few we lost. And he went back to, as a king would, the life of luxury. He kind of sat back on his heels a little bit and said, look how things are going so well. Look how good things are. He became a little bit lazy. And what will this do to the kingdom? It caused his people to become discontent. We had all these great things going. Now look what our king's doing. He's sitting back on his heels. He's becoming lazy. He's not keeping us a strong nation. So the people became discontent that were under Ptolemy IV's rule, and this made him to become a weaker ruler. And even though he had a big victory, his power became less and less, because in the eyes of his people, in the eyes of his word, he's starting to become a weaker ruler because of his lackadaisicalness, his laziness, him becoming content with what he had done, and he's starting to live in this life of luxury. And what do you think his opponent did? Antiochus III was well aware of what's going on. He was watching what was happening to his enemy down to the south. He's seeing that Ptolemy IV is not as strong of a ruler as he once was because of what he's doing. He's seeing, he's hearing that the people aren't happy with what's going on. So you can only imagine what's going to happen as we continue reading on. There's going to be another battle. And of course, verse 13, for the king of the north, which is Antiochus III, will raise a greater multitude than the former, so he's going to create a bigger army than what Ptolemy IV has. And after some time, the king of the north, which is Antiochus III, he's going to take his army with a lot of infantry, a lot of things, a lot of equipment, and he's going to press on, and he's going to go down and attack them again. About 15 years after that previous battle with all the elephants and all that we talked about, Ptolemy IV, he defeated Antiochus, but about 15 years after this, Antiochus III, he did create a much larger army than before, and he did go against the king of the south. Our history records prove this and show this. And during this battle that happened this time, Ptolemy IV died during this battle. And his son, Ptolemy V, Epiphanes, he was crowned king in 2003. And slide 9 shows that. So we now have a new king of the south of the Ptolemies. This is Ptolemy V, the son of the previous ruler. He's now battling the king of the north, which is Antiochus III, and they're battling. I don't know the age at the time, I didn't look it up, of Ptolemy V that he takes over or why this next thing happened, but he really didn't rule over the Egypt area. He had somebody else do it. He had a chief minister named Agathocles. He's the guy that was actually ruling over Egypt at the time. Even though Ptolemy V was the king of the Ptolemy Empire, this chief minister was the one that was ruling over Egypt. And this guy was cruel, he was brutal, he was vindictive in all his ways as he's ruling over these people. And of course, the people aren't going to like that. With as much turmoil going on in Egypt as now, Antiochus III is seeing this, and he's taking advantage of it. He saw the instability that's going on in the south. He's going down and he's raiding Phoenicia again and Palestine, which Ptolemy IV got back 15, 16 years earlier. Antiochus III is coming down. He's coming to take these back. And he goes all the way down into Gaza, and he's conquering all that. And Gaza fell in roughly 201 BC to Antiochus III when he came down from the north and started conquering again in the south area. So all this land keeps going back and forth for a little bit of period of time. And now Antiochus the third from the Seleucid Empire, he came down and he conquered some of the south again and took back some of the territory that they had lost roughly 15 years earlier. So now it's back in the Seleucid Empire control. Any questions? Like I said, it goes back and forth between these two empires throughout a lot of the chapter here. Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't see the hand. No. Who were the other two? Yes. For the most part. We really don't hear about the two further up. I mean, for the most part, I stopped writing their names down. I mean, going through the history thing, when I'm looking at it, I'm really not hearing anything about them battling anybody or causing any problem, causing any grief, or causing any strife. Don't hear anything about it. It's always about the Ptolemy and Seleucid that started. I think it was Ptolemy the First and Seleucus the First. They're the ones that initially took over 2 of the 4 portions that were divided up into the Greek Empire. I mean, if we looked at it geographically, the other one might be better. Yeah, I think the other one's better. On the left side of the map, the lower left is Africa, which is Egypt here. That's where the Ptolemies are. So you think about it, for them to get anywhere else, they're either crossing the Mediterranean Sea or they're going through that little narrow Gaza Strip, so to speak, through Palestine. To bring all their warriors through, they're either on boat or they're going through that little strip. You can see the blue to the right side, That's how huge and massive the Seleucid Empire became. Not in the beginning, but that's how big it became. And then further up north, when you go around more over into Europe, that's where those other two generals that took over Alexander the Great's empire, they were stuck up there. They minded their own business for the most part. They conquered a few little things, but it wasn't, until like what Tom was saying, the Seleucids really started getting big. Yes, they conquered a lot of territory, but there wasn't a whole lot of people. There was a lot of vast empty land there, but they took a lot of territory. And for whatever reasons, why the Seleucids and Ptolemies started going after each other, it was just a land grab. And the Ptolemies were stuck in the Africa area, and to do anything land, they had to go through that narrow strip, so it was hard for them. And same with the Seleucids come down, they had to go through that narrow area or go through by sea, which we'll see somebody doing a sea battle later on. But why these two empires went after each other and the other two did not, of these four generals from Alexander the Great, history's not saying the reason why that happened, but apparently the two that took over were satisfied with what they had. Maybe they stuck to the roots of what, when they were a general underneath Alexander the Great. Terry, then Bill.
Couple of comments. You notice the one on the far left at the top is basically Greece itself, that area around Greece. These folks didn't really have anybody to fight. They weren't going to go north into what we call the Balkans, because those people were uncivilized and they didn't want anything to do with them. So they didn't really have a battle up there to fight. They were busy taking care of their own business. And the same thing with over what's today Turkey. They didn't want to fight against Seleucia. They weren't ready to fight anybody. Okay. And now Seleucia looks huge, but it's basically empty.
Empty land.
There's very few people. The Ptolemy looks smaller, but the Egyptians had a lot more people down there. So even though Seleucia looks so huge and the Ptolemies look smaller, as far as people are involved, and Seleucia had to move people over a huge amount of territory to even get them to go fight. And a lot of these people didn't want to go fight. They had no axe in that. They had no axe to grind there. So there was a lot of agony going back and forth here between these two. You're right. There were two of Alexander's generals who decided they both wanted all the power and they were going to keep on fighting it. And their children and their grandchildren and their grandchildren just kept on doing those battles. It went on for hundreds of years.
To me, it's like the Hatfields and McCoys. I think these people later down the line had no clue why they initially started fighting. I have no record or proof of that, but it's when you get hundreds of years away, how do you know why this initially started? But they kept doing it because they're going after the land grab, and what is there that they really want? But more importantly, it's not what they want. It's God's plan of what's going to be happening to his people because they're being in captivity this whole time. They're being punished, and they're caught in the middle of this. So they're being taught a lesson with the Ptolemies and Seleucids fighting against each other. And that's down the road after all of this, after Antiochus IV takes further up. Yes. Bill.
So, Bill's question here is a science teacher. Thank you for the research on elephants. African elephants are 9 tons, 10 to 13 feet tall, have bigger ears, and real large tusks. And he said the Indian elephants are smaller, have smaller ears, and some of the males don't even grow tusks.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's just what I found here. So, who had what anyway? I can't remember.
The Seleucids had the Indian elephants. They're closer that way. And the Ptolemies in Africa had the African elephants. So let me get this straight. You weren't listening to me when I was teaching? I said you weren't listening when I was teaching, so. No, that's okay. Anything before we go? We got sidetracked with the elephants, which I didn't mean to do, so. Yeah. So, yeah, it's time to stop. No last words for anybody. Well, no last words for Terry, Ted, or Bill. Anybody else? This Bill. No, I mean, there's some truth to that. Because if you look through history, you see what some of the Indian elephants did, how they were used in in parades and things for the royalty people, and the African elephants were often used for workhorses, so to speak, out, I don't want to say out in the field, but out in the jungles and that, they were more of a workhorse when you see some of the things through history. But they both were used to fight against one another and other people. Last one. Could be. That's it. See y'all next week.